I'm Mia, 28, female, and my own mother and sister starved my 5-year-old daughter for 2 days while I was in the hospital, leaving her to collapse on the floor. I came home not to a welcome party, but to the sight of my child, pale and barely breathing. The reason for their cruelty was simple, according to my mother, Helen. My daughter Lily was, in her words, someone else's worthless mistake. A temporary visitor not worthy of the food that her real family needed. When I found my daughter, I didn't scream or break down. A strange, cold calm washed over me. In that moment, I knew I wouldn't argue or cry. I would just silently, methodically, and completely destroy everything they ever loved. My family has always operated on a system of tiers, and from the moment I was born, I was on the bottom one. My mother, Helen, is a woman who values appearances above all else. She curates her life like the prize-winning rose garden she tends with obsessive care. Everything must look perfect from the outside, no matter how much poison is required to keep it that way. Her daughter, my younger sister Brenda, is her most prized rose. Brenda, at 26, is the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the living embodiment of all of Helen's hopes. Then there was me, the weed in the garden. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was the foundation of our family dynamic. It was in every decision, every gift, every word of praise or criticism. The clearest example was our education. When Brenda announced she wanted to major in business at a prestigious university, my parents celebrated as if she'd won a Nobel Prize. They paid her tuition without a second thought, co-signed her apartment lease, and when she graduated, a brand new car with a giant red bow was waiting for her in the driveway. 2 years earlier, when I had announced my intention to study graphic design, my choice was met with scorn. A useless hobby, my mother had sniffed, turning her nose up. What are you going to do with that, Mia? Draw cartoons for a living? We're not paying for you to waste your time and our money. I was forced to take out student loans and work 2 part-time jobs all through college to make ends meet. My graduation was a non-event. There was no party, no car, not even a card. Just a dismissive, "Well, at least that's over with," from my mother during a brief phone call. This hierarchy became even more pronounced when I had Lily. I was a single mother, and in my mother's eyes, this was the ultimate confirmation of my failure. From the day she was born, Lily was not treated as a grandchild, but as Clara's problem. My mother never once offered to babysit. On birthdays and holidays, Brenda would be showered with expensive gifts: a designer handbag, a weekend spa trip, a down payment for her boutique clothing store. Lily never received a single present from her grandmother. Not a doll, not a book, not even a $5 bill in a card. It was a deliberate, cruel omission designed to remind me and my child of our place. The financial disparity was a constant, gaping wound. My parents were not poor. My father had a successful contracting business, and my mother managed the finances with an iron fist. They had the means to help both their children, but they chose to help only one. When Brenda wanted to open her boutique, they co-signed a massive business loan for her without hesitation. The store was a vanity project, a place for Brenda to play shop with her friends, and it was constantly bleeding money. Yet, my parents kept pouring their resources into it, propping up Brenda's fantasy of being a successful entrepreneur. Last year, I tried to get a small condo. I had saved diligently for a down payment, but with the market being what it was, I was just a little short. I swallowed my pride and asked my parents if they would consider helping me with the remaining amount, not as a gift, but as a loan I would repay with interest. My mother looked at me with cold pity. "Why would we invest in you?" she asked, her voice devoid of warmth. "You made your bed when you decided to have a child out of wedlock. You and your problem are not our responsibility." I left their house that day with a familiar ache in my chest, the feeling of being utterly and completely alone. I eventually secured the condo on my own, working freelance projects late into the night after putting Lily to bed. It was small, but it was ours. It was a safe haven, a tiny island away from the toxic sea of my family. I thought we were finally free. I never imagined that a medical emergency would force me to throw my precious daughter back into the water with the sharks. It started as a dull ache in my side on a Tuesday morning. I dismissed it as a pulled muscle or indigestion. I had a major project deadline for a client, and I couldn't afford to be sick. I drank some tea, took a pain reliever, and tried to focus on my screen. Lily was playing quietly on the floor beside my desk, humming a little song, as she arranged her building blocks into a colorful tower. Her presence was a warm, steadying anchor in my often chaotic life. By lunchtime, the ache had sharpened into a persistent, stabbing pain that made me gasp. I tried to stand up, and a wave of nausea and dizziness sent me crashing back into my chair. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. This wasn't normal. This was something serious. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of pain. My first thought was of Lily. If something was wrong with me, who would take care of her? I had friends, wonderful friends, but they all had their own jobs and families. My apartment was a 40-minute drive from any of them. The only people who lived close by, just 10 minutes away, were my mother and sister. My hand trembled as I picked up my phone to call my mother. I hated it. I hated the feeling of dependency, of having to ask her for anything. It felt like a personal failure, handing her yet another piece of ammunition to use against me. But the pain was getting worse, and fear for my daughter overrode my pride. Helen answered on the third ring, her voice clipped and impatient. "Mia, what is it? I'm busy." "Mom, I need help," I said, my voice strained. "Something's wrong. I'm in a lot of pain, and I think I need to go to the hospital." There was a long, exasperated sigh on the other end of the line. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Mia, you're always so dramatic. It's probably just cramps. Take an aspirin." "No, Mom, it's not cramps," I insisted, my voice rising with urgency. "It's a sharp pain in my side, and I feel like I'm going to be sick. I really think it's serious. Can you please just come and get Lily? I don't know who else to call on such short notice." Another sigh, heavier this time. I could picture her perfectly, standing in her immaculate kitchen, tapping her manicured nails on the granite countertop, annoyed at this interruption to her perfectly ordered day. And what am I supposed to do with her? Brenda and I have plans. "Please, Mom, it's an emergency," I begged, the pain making my vision swim. "Just for a little while, until I figure out what's going on." "Fine," she snapped, the word cracking like a whip. "Fine, we'll be there in 20 minutes, have her ready, and don't expect us to change our entire schedule for you." She hung up without another word. I collapsed back in my chair, momentarily relieved but also filled with a profound sense of dread. I called for an ambulance and then focused on Lily. I helped her pack a small bag with her favorite stuffed rabbit, a couple of books, and her unicorn pajamas. "Mommy, is your tummy still hurting?" she asked, her big brown eyes filled with concern. I forced a smile, stroking her soft hair. "It is, sweetie, but the doctors are going to make it all better. You're going to have a little sleepover at Grandma's house, okay? You have to be a very good girl for Grandma Helen and Aunt Brenda." Her little face fell. "But I don't like Grandma's house, it's quiet." Quiet was Lily's gentle word for it. The real words were cold, sterile, and unwelcoming. There were no toys, no child-friendly snacks. My mother insisted that Lily sit perfectly still on the plastic-covered furniture, not touching anything. My heart broke at the thought of leaving her there, but I had no choice. When my mother and Brenda arrived, they walked in without knocking. Helen's eyes swept over my apartment with disdain, as if noticing a new layer of dust she hadn't seen before. Brenda didn't even look at me. She was scrolling through her phone, a bored expression on her face. "Are you ready?" my mother demanded, not a hint of concern in her voice. "The ambulance is outside. You're making a scene for the whole neighborhood." "Her bag is by the door," I said, my voice weak. I knelt down to hug Lily, holding her tight. "I love you so much, baby. I'll call you as soon as I can." "I love you too, Mommy," she whispered, clinging to me. Brenda finally looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "Oh, honestly, it's just for a few hours. Stop being so theatrical." My mother pulled Lily's arm, separating her from me. "Come on, let's go." She didn't offer a word of comfort, no, "I hope you feel better," or "let us know what the doctors say." They just turned and walked out, dragging my confused and frightened daughter with them. As the paramedics helped me onto the gurney, I saw them getting into my mother's pristine luxury sedan. Lily was put in the back seat, looking small and lost. She pressed her face against the window, her eyes searching for me. That image of her frightened face in the window of my mother's car as it pulled away was burned into my mind as the ambulance doors closed, plunging me into a world of sirens and searing pain. My body was terrified of what was happening inside it, but my heart was terrified of what was happening inside my mother's house. The world became a blur of bright lights, beeping machines and urgent, muffled voices. The emergency room was chaotic. Doctors and nurses moved with efficient, practiced speed. The pain was a roaring fire in my abdomen now, and I could only answer their questions in short, gasped phrases. After a whirlwind of tests and an ultrasound, the diagnosis came quickly: acute appendicitis. My appendix was inflamed and on the verge of rupturing. I needed emergency surgery. "We need to take you up to the OR now, Mia," a kind-faced surgeon explained, his eyes full of professional sympathy. "It's a routine procedure, a laparoscopy. You'll be here for a couple of days to recover, but you're going to be fine." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost eclipsed the pain. It was treatable. I wasn't dying. But the relief was immediately followed by a fresh wave of anxiety. A couple of days. That meant Lily would be with my mother and sister for at least 2 nights. "My daughter," I said, my voice hoarse as they began to wheel my gurney towards the elevators. "I need to call my daughter. I need to let my mother know I'm going into surgery." A nurse handed me my phone from the plastic bag containing my belongings. "You have a few minutes," she said gently. I fumbled with the screen, my fingers clumsy from pain and medication. I called my mother's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. "Hi, Mom, it's me. They're taking me into surgery now. It's my appendix. They said I'll be here for a couple of days. Please, please take good care of Lily. Tell her I love her." I tried Brenda's number next. She answered with an annoyed, "What?" "Brenda, it's me. I'm going into surgery right now. Did you get Mom's voicemail?" "Yeah, whatever," she said dismissively. I could hear loud music and chatter in the background. She was at the boutique. "Listen, I'm with a customer. We'll handle it. Don't be a drama queen." She hung up before I could say another word. "We have to go now," the nurse said, and my phone was taken away. As they wheeled me into the cold, sterile operating room, the last thing I felt before the anesthesia took hold was a sickening knot of dread. "We'll handle it." The words echoed in my mind, offering no comfort at all. I woke up hours later in a quiet recovery room. The fiery pain in my side had been replaced by a dull, sore ache. My throat was dry and I felt groggy, but my mind was instantly, terrifyingly clear. Lily. I needed to talk to Lily. I pressed the call button and a nurse came in. "How are you feeling, Mia?" "Sore," I croaked. "Can I have my phone? I need to call my daughter." She retrieved it for me and helped me take a sip of water. I dialed my mother's number again, straight to voicemail. I tried the house landline. It rang and rang until the machine picked up. I called Brenda. Voicemail. A cold fear started to creep up my spine. They were just busy, I told myself. They were probably out shopping or having dinner. They wouldn't ignore my calls on purpose. But a darker part of me, the part that had a lifetime of experience with their selfishness, knew better. I spent the rest of that evening and all of the next day in a state of escalating panic. I called every hour, then every half hour. My messages became more and more frantic. "Mom, please pick up. I just want to talk to Lily." "Brenda, can you please just put her on the phone for 1 minute? I need to hear her voice." Once on Wednesday afternoon, my mother finally answered. Her voice was cold. "Mia, you need to stop calling. You're harassing us. The child is fine. We are very busy, and we don't have time to be running to the phone every 5 minutes." "Busy? Mom, please just let me say hi to her. I'm her mother, I'm worried." "She is eating lunch," Helen said curtly. "She can't come to the phone with her mouth full. It's rude, I have to go." Click. The lie was so blatant, so casual, she's eating lunch. It was meant to placate me, but it did the opposite. It was a performance. I knew my mother. If Lily were actually there, eating happily, my mother would have made a show of it, putting her on the phone to prove what a wonderful, capable grandmother she was. The fact that she didn't, the fact that she shut me down so quickly, meant something was wrong. The hours crawled by. The hospital staff were wonderful, but I was a terrible patient. I barely ate, I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the clock on the wall, my stomach churning with a horrible mixture of fear and helplessness. I was trapped in this bed, miles away, while my daughter was in that cold, loveless house with two women who saw her as nothing more than a burden. The silence from their end was no longer just neglectful, it felt malicious. It was a wall they had built around my daughter, and I was on the wrong side, screaming into the void. On Thursday morning, my surgeon came to check on me. "You're recovering remarkably well, Mia," he said, looking at my chart. "Your vitals are stable, and He incision looks good. If you feel up to it, I see no reason why you can't be discharged today instead of tomorrow, as long as you promise to take it easy." The words were a lifeline. "Yes," I said, my voice filled with more energy than I'd felt in days. "Yes, I want to go home, I need to go home." I needed to get to my daughter. Now. The discharge process felt agonizingly slow. The paperwork, the final instructions from the nurse, the wait for the transport volunteer, every minute was a lifetime. I didn't call my mother to tell her I was coming. Some instinct, a primal and protective alarm bell, was screaming in my head. Don't warn them, just go. I took a taxi, sinking into the back seat and giving the driver my address. My body ached with every bump in the road, the seatbelt pressing uncomfortably against my tender abdomen. But the physical pain was a distant hum compared to the roaring anxiety in my heart. I pictured Lily's face, her sweet smile. I imagined her running to the door to greet me, wrapping her little arms around my legs. The thought was the only thing that kept me from telling the driver to speed. When the taxi pulled up to my small condo complex, I saw my mother's car in the visitor parking spot. So they were here. A strange, bitter taste filled my mouth. They hadn't even bothered to take Lily to their own house, a place with a yard. They had kept her cooped up in my small apartment for 2 full days. I paid the driver, my hands shaking slightly as I fumbled with the cash. I walked slowly up the path to my front door, my hospital-issued bag slung over my shoulder. The building was quiet. The air was still. I slipped my key into the lock and turned it as silently as I could. The apartment was unnervingly silent. Usually, if Lily was home, there was a low hum of activity, the television playing a cartoon, the sound of her humming to herself, the clatter of toys. Now there was nothing, just a heavy, oppressive stillness. "Hello," I called out, my voice raspy. "Mom, Brenda, I'm home." No answer. A half-eaten plate of fancy takeout sushi sat on the coffee table, next to 2 empty wine glasses. A fashion magazine was splayed open. It was clear what my mother and sister had been doing. They had been relaxing, enjoying themselves. But where was Lily? "Lily," I called again, my voice higher, laced with a panic I could no longer contain. "Sweetie, Mommy's home." A silence. I moved through the small living area into the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The door to Lily's room was closed. I pushed it open. The room was pristine, the bed perfectly made. Her little bag of toys and pajamas sat untouched by the door. She hadn't been in here. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. I turned towards my own bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and my world stopped. There on the floor next to my bed was a small, crumpled heap. It was Lily. She was lying on her side, her face ashen white, her lips tinged with blue. Her little chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. She was so still, so quiet. For one horrifying second, I thought she was gone. The world went silent. The roaring in my ears faded to a dull buzz. The sharp anxiety that had been my constant companion for 2 days vanished, replaced by something else. Something cold, heavy, and absolute. It was like a sheet of ice forming over a churning sea. There were no tears. There was no scream lodged in my throat. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of fear, became a place of perfect, terrifying clarity. I knelt beside her, my movements slow and deliberate. I touched her cheek. It was cold. "Lily," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. A tiny, weak whimper escaped her lips. She was alive. Barely. At that moment, I heard the front door open again, followed by my sister Brenda's laughter. "I'm telling you, Mom, he is so obsessed with me. He just bought me." Her voice trailed off as she and my mother walked into the living room. "Mia," my mother exclaimed, her voice a mixture of shock and annoyance. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be out until tomorrow." I didn't answer. I gently, carefully scooped my daughter's feather-light body into my arms. I stood up, my surgical incisions screaming in protest, but I didn't feel it. I turned and walked out of the bedroom, carrying my child. The looks on their faces when they saw Lily in my arms were not of concern or guilt. It was irritation, annoyance at being caught. "What is wrong with her?" Brenda asked, wrinkling her nose. "Is she sick? Don't let her get me sick. I have a dress fitting tomorrow." My mother crossed her arms, her expression hardening into the familiar mask of cruel indignation. "She's being dramatic, just like her mother. She was perfectly fine a minute ago. She's just a temporary visitor, Mia. We fed her. She just refused to eat. Some children are just picky." I looked from their callous faces to the face of my starving child, her head lolling against my shoulder. I saw the faint, dark bruise blooming on her pale cheek. I saw her chapped, dry lips. I saw the truth. And in that silent, chilling moment, the old Mia, the one who hoped for their approval, who cried after their insults, who swallowed their cruelty, died. In her place, something new and dangerous was born. I looked straight through them, my eyes as cold and empty as a winter sky. I didn't say a word. I just turned, walked out the front door, and left them standing in the ruins of the family I once thought I had. I didn't look back. Carrying Lily, I walked past my mother's expensive car and out to the main street, my focus narrowed to a single point: survival, Lily's survival. My own pain was a distant signal from a body I no longer inhabited. My mind was a machine, calculating, processing, planning. A taxi was dropping someone off at the end of the block. I flagged it down, my movements calm and deliberate. "The hospital," I said to the driver, my voice flat and even. "Emergency entrance, please hurry." The driver glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes widening at the sight of Lily, limp and pale in my arms. He didn't ask questions. He just drove. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room I had just left hours before, the nightmare became terrifyingly real. A nurse recognized me and rushed over with a wheelchair. "Mia, what happened? Who is this?" "My daughter, Lily," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "She won't wake up. She's been with my mother. Please, help her." They whisked Lily away from me, a team of doctors and nurses descending on her small, still form. I was left in a small, sterile waiting room, the silence finally crashing down on me. But still, I did not cry. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Tears were for grief, for sadness. What I felt was a rage so pure and cold it had frozen everything else inside me. I took out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I opened a new note and began to type. Date of hospital admission. Date of discharge. Time I arrived home. Condition I found Lily in: unconscious, pale, blue lips, weak breathing. Visible injuries: bruise on left cheek. Mother's car in parking lot. Helen and Brenda present in the apartment. Their statements: she's being dramatic. We fed her, she's a picky eater. A doctor, a woman with kind, tired eyes, entered the room an hour later. She sat down opposite me. "Mia," she began gently. "Lily is stable. We've started her on an IV drip. She was suffering from severe dehydration and hypoglycemia, which is a dangerous drop in blood sugar from lack of food. The bruise on her cheek is consistent with a slap from an adult hand. Can you tell me what happened?" I looked at her and told her everything, my voice never wavering. I told her about my emergency surgery, about leaving Lily with my mother and sister. I told her about the unanswered calls, the dismissive conversations. I told her about the takeout sushi and wine glasses on the coffee table. As I spoke, the doctor's expression shifted from professional concern to quiet horror. She took notes, her pen scratching against the paper. When I finished, she looked at me, her gaze steady. Mia, what your mother and sister did is not just neglect. It is child abuse. We are legally and morally obligated to file a report with Child Protective Services. Good, I said. File it. I want everything on record. The police will also need to be involved to take a statement, she added. Are you prepared for that? I am, I said, but first, can I see her? Lily was asleep in a hospital crib, looking impossibly small amidst a web of tubes and wires. An IV line snaked into her tiny hand. A heart monitor beeped in a slow, steady rhythm, the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I sat in the chair beside her bed and watched her breathe for hours. Later that night, when she was sleeping more peacefully, I made a decision. I took the taxi back to my apartment. I knew they would be gone, fled back to the safety of their own home, confident that I would, as always, eventually back down. The key was still under the mat where I'd hidden it. The apartment was just as I'd left it. The sushi container and wine glasses were still on the table. A cold fury guided my actions. I put on a pair of disposable gloves from under the sink. I took my laptop from my bag, and I began to work. First, I documented the scene. I took clear, high-resolution photos of everything: the takeout containers, the wine glasses, Brenda's discarded magazine. Then I went through the trash. There it was in the kitchen bin, a single, stale, half-eaten piece of bread, and next to it a few strands of long, brown hair, Lily's hair. This was the bread my starving daughter had tried to eat. This was the evidence of my sister ripping it away from her. I carefully placed it in a Ziploc bag. My mind was working with a clarity I'd never known. This wasn't just about calling the police. That was too simple, too clean. They would hire expensive lawyers. They would twist the story. My mother would cry her crocodile tears and talk about how difficult I'd always been. They would try to paint me as an unstable, vengeful daughter and an unfit mother. No, the legal system would be the final blow. But first, I had to dismantle their world. I had to destroy the things they valued more than my daughter's life. My mother's reputation, and my sister's comfortable, financed lifestyle. I packed a suitcase for myself and one for Lily. I took my laptop, my external hard drive with all my work files, the bag of evidence, and every important document I owned. I left everything else. The furniture, the clothes in the closets, the kitchenware. They were just things, and things could be replaced. Before I left, I did one last thing. I logged into my mother's social media account. I had known her password for years, a simple combination of Brenda's name and birthday. I didn't post anything. I just went to her private messages, and I started to read. I was looking for something specific, a vulnerability, and it didn't take long to find it. My mother's entire life was an open book of vanity and deceit. The plan, cold and sharp, began to form in my mind. I walked out of the apartment for the last time, locking the door behind me. I didn't look back. I checked into a small, clean motel a few towns over, paid in cash, and set up my command center. The war had begun. From the anonymous quiet of the motel room, with Lily sleeping peacefully in the bed next to me thanks to the hospital's care, I began my campaign. There was no joy in what I was doing, no thrill of revenge. There was only the grim, methodical satisfaction of a surgeon excising a cancer. My mother and sister were a disease that had nearly killed my child. I would cut them out of our lives completely. My first target was my mother, Helen. Her entire identity was built on her public image. She was the respected wife of a local businessman, a devout churchgoer, a pillar of her community, and most importantly, the reigning champion of the annual summer garden competition. Her prize-winning roses were her pride and joy, a symbol of the perfect, orderly life she projected to the world. I would turn that symbol into a monument of her shame. I spent the first day on my laptop, my graphic design skills honed by years of professional work. I created a flyer. It wasn't angry or sloppy, It was designed to look like an official community safety alert. The headline was simple and chilling: a warning to our community, child abuse in our midst. Below the headline, I laid out the facts in cold, emotionless bullet points. I mentioned a local grandmother, Helen, by name. I detailed the dates I was in the hospital. I described the state I found my 5-year-old granddaughter in. I used the medical terms from the doctor's report: severe dehydration, hypoglycemia, malnutrition, contusion consistent with an adult slap. I scanned and included a redacted copy of the hospital's initial assessment, blacking out Lily's name but leaving the horrific details visible. I included a photo of the single, stale piece of bread from the trash can. I ended with a simple, haunting question: if this is how she treats her own blood, are your children safe? I designed an accompanying social media page and a simple website with the same information, making it all anonymous but easily searchable. The next morning, while Lily was still asleep, I drove to a 24-hour print shop in a different town and printed 500 copies of the flyer. The garden competition was on Saturday. On Friday night, dressed in a dark hoodie, I moved like a ghost through my mother's pristine upper-middle-class neighborhood. I put a flyer in every mailbox. I drove to her church and tucked one into every hymnal in the pews. I went to the community center and left a stack on the information table. Finally, I posted the link to the website on the community's local Facebook group, an online forum my mother checked obsessively. Then I went back to the motel, deleted the anonymous email account I'd used, and waited. My next target was Brenda. Brenda didn't care about reputation, she cared about money and status. Her entire life was a performance funded by our parents and her wealthy fiancé, a man from a very traditional, old-money family. Her boutique was a failure, but she presented it as a chic success. Her upcoming wedding was her crowning achievement, the final step in securing a life of effortless luxury. I already had the ammunition I needed from my brief foray into my mother's private messages. Helen, in her vanity, had complained to her friends about how much money she and my father were giving Brenda to keep the boutique afloat. She had even detailed the specific amounts they had transferred to cover Brenda's little shopping problem so her fiancé wouldn't find out. I went to work. I created a detailed, professional-looking financial summary. I pulled the public records for Brenda's failing business, showing its mounting debts. I created a separate document showing the timeline of large cash infusions from my parents, cross-referencing them with Brenda's social media posts where she flaunted new designer bags, expensive vacations, and spa days, all things she claimed her successful business afforded her. The narrative was clear: Brenda was not a savvy businesswoman. She was a fraud, deceiving her fiancé and his family about her financial stability and character. I packaged it all into a crisp manila envelope. I typed a formal letter, purportedly from a concerned friend of the family, and addressed it to Brenda's future father-in-law, a notoriously stern and principled man who ran his family's empire with an iron fist. I knew from Brenda's boasting that he valued honesty and integrity above all else. I drove to a post office 3 towns away and sent the package via certified mail, ensuring it would be signed for. The fallout was faster and more spectacular than I could have imagined. By Saturday afternoon, my phone, which I kept on silent, was vibrating with notifications. Friends of mine, who knew nothing of my plan, were sending me screenshots from the community Facebook page. It had exploded. People were horrified, disgusted. My mother's friends were posting shocked emojis. Neighbors were sharing stories of Helen's arrogance. The pastor of her church released a statement about praying for the family during this disturbing time. My mother's perfect world was burning to the ground. She didn't win the garden competition. She didn't even show up. Brenda's world imploded on Monday. She called me, screaming hysterically. "What did you do?" she shrieked into the phone. "What did you do? His parents called off the wedding. They said I was a liar and a grifter. They're gone, Mia. My life is over. You ruined my life." I listened to her screeching, my expression unchanged. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke for the first time. "No, Brenda," I said, my voice as cold and calm as a frozen lake. You ruined your life when you helped our mother starve my daughter. You just didn't realize it until now." I hung up the phone and blocked her number. The two pillars of their lives, Helen's reputation and Brenda's future, were rubble. They were exposed, humiliated, and for the first time facing consequences. But I wasn't finished. This was just the demolition. The final act was yet to come. With their worlds in ashes, they were vulnerable. The public shaming and Brenda's broken engagement had stripped away their layers of self-importance and left them exposed. This was the moment to deliver the final, legal blow. I had already given my statement to a detective, a patient, thorough woman who had looked at the evidence I'd collected with grim professionalism. The photos, the medical reports, the Ziploc bag with the piece of bread, and Lily's own testimony, carefully recorded by a child advocacy specialist, painted an undeniable picture of criminal neglect and abuse. My family's history of emotional abuse, while not illegal, provided a powerful context for their motive and character. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman recommended by the Victims Advocacy Unit. We filed for an emergency restraining order, which was granted immediately based on the police report and medical evidence. Helen and Brenda were legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me or Lily. They were served the papers at their home by a sheriff's deputy. I wasn't there to see it, but my lawyer told me they were stunned into silence. The impenetrable fortress of their self-righteousness had been breached. Next, we filed the civil lawsuit. We sued for damages, citing the cost of Lily's medical care, my lost income, emotional distress, and the funds for ongoing therapy that Lily would undoubtedly need. We also made it clear that we were cooperating fully with the district attorney's office on the criminal charges of child endangerment and abuse. My father, a man who had spent my entire life as a passive enabler, finally called me. He sounded old and broken. "Mia," he pleaded, "can't you stop this? Your mother is a wreck, she won't leave the house. Brenda is in a terrible state. You've made your point. Isn't it enough?" "Enough?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You think this is about making a point? They nearly killed my child. They left a 5-year-old girl to starve while they drank wine and ordered sushi. Did you know that, Dad? While you were at work, providing the money for that house and that wine, that's what was happening. Was that enough for you?" He was silent. "Your chance to do something was 2 days ago, a year ago, 20 years ago," I continued. "You chose to do nothing, so I am doing something. This isn't a negotiation, stay away from us." I ended the call. My parents' lawyer, realizing the mountain of evidence against them and the public relations nightmare I had created, advised them to settle. They wanted to avoid a public trial at all costs. The settlement was substantial. It was enough to cover all our expenses, and more importantly, to give me and Lily a chance to start completely over, somewhere far away where the names Helen and Brenda were just names. 6 months later, Lily and I were living in a small, sunny apartment in a city by the ocean, hundreds of miles from our old life. The air here was clean and smelled of salt and possibility. We had a small balcony where I'd placed pots of bright, cheerful flowers. No roses. Lily was thriving. She was in a wonderful new school, she had friends, and she was seeing a kind, gentle therapist who helped her process what she called the sad, hungry time. The nightmares were becoming less frequent. The light had returned to her eyes, and the sound of her laughter once again filled our home. That sound was the only victory I cared about. I never spoke to my family again. I heard through the grapevine that my father sold the business and they moved away. Brenda was working a retail job, living in a small apartment paid for by what little was left after the settlement. Helen, stripped of her social standing and her prized daughter's glorious future, had become a recluse. Their love for those things had been the weapon they used against me and my daughter. I had simply taken the weapon away. I don't feel vengeful anymore. I don't feel much of anything when I think of them. They are ghosts from another life, faded figures in a story that is no longer mine. My story is here, in this sunlit apartment, with my beautiful, resilient daughter. It's in the feel of her small hand in mine as we walk along the beach, watching the waves wash the sand clean. It's in the quiet peace of knowing that she is safe, she is loved, and she is fed. I didn't just destroy everything they loved, I destroyed the hold they had on me. And in doing so, I built a new world for my daughter, a world where she would never, ever be considered a worthless mistake. For anyone out there who has been made to feel small or worthless by the people who were supposed to love you the most, I want you to know this. Your worth is not determined by their inability to see it. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to walk away, to close the door, and to build your own damn house, a place where only love is welcome.